Hello, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. Today, playing some Selesnya Humans in Historic Best of 3 deck. Going to do the deck tech in this video, but I do have a gameplay video if you just want to see that. Annotation in the top right-hand corner, or there's a link to that video in the description down below. I'm going to talk briefly about the deck and hopefully give you a better idea of how Selesnya Humans works in Historic. So this is a pretty well-known and established archetype in the format by this point. It is a very strong deck and does a lot of cool stuff. Going to go over some of the cards or all of the cards and just, show you how they work. The first one I'm going to talk about is the Inquisitor Captain. This is the new one from the Alchemy set. Right now, I have it as a 2 of in this deck. It is a 3/3 for 4. It says, Vigilance, when Inquisitor Captain enters the battlefield, if there are 20 or more creature cards with mana value 3 or less among cards in your graveyard, hand, and library, seek 2 creature cards with mana value 3 or less. Put one of them onto the battlefield and shuffle the other one into your library. So this is kind of like an interesting take on the Collected Company mechanic. Collected Company allows us to look at 6 cards, then we can put 2 of those creature cards with mana value 3 or less onto the battlefield. Usually this results in, best case scenarios, hitting like a Hamlet Vanguard and a captain, Ranger Captain of Eos, something like that, Adeline and a Thalia's Lieutenant. You get some combination of creature cards. In the case of the Inquisitor Captain, you're going to be getting the Inquisitor Captain, and then you're going to get guaranteed 2 creatures from among all the 3, 2, and 1 CMC creatures in your deck, and you can choose to put one of those onto the battlefield. So it's a little bit of a safer with free Collected Company, but the downside is one of those creatures is always going to be the Inquisitor Captain, and it is a 3/3 vigilance creature, nothing too exciting. Still, I think it's a pretty cool card. I have 2 of them in the deck. I'm really interested to test it out and see how it performs. Of course, we're also playing 4 copies of Collected Company, and since we are playing 4 copies of Collected Company, it means we have a bunch of 3 CMC cards that we want to hit with that. The first one of those cards is the Brutal Cathar. This is a 2/2 human soldier werewolf, and it says, when this creature enters the battlefield or transforms into the Brutal Cathar, exile target creature card and opponent controls until this leaves the battlefield. So basically, we're able to steal one of our opponent's creature cards, and it won't go back to them until the Brutal Cathar is removed from the field. It also transforms into a 3/3 with first strike and ward pay 3. Overall, Brutal Cathar is pretty cool. However, there is a similar card, the Skyclave Apparition. This is a little bit more powerful because it can get any card, any non-token permanent with mana value 4 or less. That means enchantments, artifacts, creatures, what have you. It's a little bit more versatile. However, it is a core spirit, whereas the Brutal Cathar is in fact a human. Next, we are playing 3 copies of Adeline. This is just an awesome card. One of my favorite new-ish cards. It is a 3 CMC star 4. The power of this card is determined by how many other creatures we have on the field. And then it says, whenever you attack, it doesn't have to be Adeline, it can be any creature attacking. For each opponent, create a 1/1 white human creature token that's tapped and attacking that player. What ends up happening a lot of the time is that 1/1 will end up running into your opponent's 2/2 or 3/3 and immediately die. But once in a while, you're able to generate a lot of really good value with Adeline, create a nice wide board of 1/1 white humans. The cool thing about Adeline, when she does make the 1/1, it works very well with another card in our deck, Thalia's Lieutenant. Thalia's Lieutenant says, when it enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each other human you control. That's going to mean basically all the other cards in our deck. Not basically all of them, except the sideboard. The sideboard plays a lot of non-humans. And then whenever another human enters the battlefield, token or not token, doesn't matter, Thalia's Lieutenant gets a +1/+1 counter. So with the Adeline on the field and attacking, the Thalia's Lieutenants just grow and grow and grow. I've seen these things get massive with an Adeline on the field. Next up, the Hamlet Vanguard, a 1/1 for 3. Not very impressive. However, it gets a little bit better. It does have Ward 2, and it has a pretty sweet ability. It says Hamlet Vanguard enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it for each other non-token human you control. The ideal play pattern would be something like a Thraben Inspector on turn 1, a Thalia's Lieutenant on turn 2, and then the Hamlet Vanguard on turn 3. It would enter the battlefield as a 5/5 with Ward 2. I don't like that it doesn't have any kind of other evasion or keywords. Things like Vigilance or Trample would have made this card very good, but still Ward 2 is something, and it can easily be a giant creature that the opponent will have a hard time dealing with. I've seen this thing hit 7/7, 9/9, 11/11 quite often when you're playing games. Next, we're playing 3 copies of the Ranger Captain of Eos. This enters the battlefield and it says we may search for a creature card with mana value 1 or less, reveal it, and put it into our hand. That's why we're playing a bit of a toolbox. We have a couple of random 1-drops. We're playing 1 Thraben Inspector. It is a 1/2, enters the battlefield and investigates. Investigates means it creates a clue token, and we can crack the clue token for 2 and draw a card. Then we're playing 2 copies of the Olenbach Escort. This is a human cleric, 1/1 with vigilance. It has a neat little ability. It says sacrifice Olenbach Escort. Target creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it gains lifelink, indestructible until the end of the turn. This is pretty neat. The kind of debate I've been having with a subscriber of mine is whether or not the Escort is better than the Selfless Savior. And I'm not really sure which one is better or worse, but I do like the Escort in a deck where we have Thalia's Lieutenant and the Hamlet Vanguard. Those are going to have +1/+1s on them, and you're going to want to protect those creatures most of the time. We also have another card in the deck that is kind of relevant for that. Katilda Dawnheart Prime. She has an activated ability. Pay 4, a green, and a white. Tap her, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So there are some +1/+1 synergies in this deck that would work very well with the Escort. I think overall the Escort's pretty good. Next, the Giant Killer. This is probably one of the more important cards to go and grab when you do play out your Ranger Captain of Eos. This has 2 abilities: Chop Down, destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. Really good for taking out really big, pesky creatures that the opponents may have on their side of the field. And then its regular ability, pay 1 and a white tap target creature. I've had Giant Killers come up huge, lock down the opponents, and I've also had it used against me. Just really shuts down the board in some cases, especially those decks that are kind of Voltron-y that have gone all in on one big creature. Next, we are also playing 4 copies of the Esper Sentinel. It is a human artifact, which is pretty neat. It's a 1/1 for 1. It says whenever an opponent casts their first non-creature spell each turn, draw a card unless that player pays X, where X is Esper Sentinel's power. Most of the time, Esper Sentinel is going to be a 1/1. However, we can easily grow it with things like Thalia's Lieutenant. 2/2, 3/3 is not unrealistic. And then in Historic right now, so many people are playing control-oriented decks. So many people are playing sorceries and instances. So having Esper Sentinels in the deck right now is super important, in my opinion. On another note, related to people playing control, Thalia, Guardian of Thraben. This is very important too because she says non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast. Of course, we are also playing a non-creature spell, Collect a Company, but it's the only one in the main board. Everything else is a creature, and this is going to tax our opponent's removal spells, draw spells, all of those things, make it a little bit harder for the opponent to deploy their strategy. Next, Katilda, I already talked about her a little bit, but she does have one more very important ability. Human creatures you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color to any of this creature's colors. So that means our Thalia's Lieutenants can, of course, tap for white. Something like the Hamlet Vanguard can tap for green, and Sigarda is not a human, so it doesn't tap for anything, because it is only human creatures. This is a little bit of ramp. It's going to get us to our bigger stuff quicker. It's going to help with our collected companies. I think a lot of the time this is going to come up big, just a tap here and there to ease up or ease our mana curve going forward. The last card that I need to talk about in the deck is Sigarda, Champion of Light. This is a big old angel. It protects our humans in a way. Humans you control get +1/+1. It has flying and trample, and it has a sweet Coven ability that gives us a lot of extra value. Whenever Sigarda attacks, if you control 3 or more creatures with different powers, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a human creature card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So getting a little bit of extra card draw is super important. This deck doesn't have a whole lot of value engine going on with it. So getting a Sigarda on the field when we have her Covenant ability available and attacking, always going to be good. However, I've found Sigarda to be quite the lightning rod, and she often doesn't make it to the next turn where she can attack. So we'll see how it performs. Right now, I'm only playing 1 in the deck. The Inquisitor Captain and the Sigarda kind of clutter up the idea of Collected Company. Collected Company is one of those weird cards where you need to have a mass of 3 CMC or lower creatures, and you want to have more 3 CMC creatures than 1 CMC, because when you cast a Collected Company, you don't exactly want to hit 2 Esper Sentinels, for example. You want to hit a Brutal Cathar and a Hamlet Vanguard, or an Adeline and a Ranger Captain of Eos, for example. But when we start putting 4 CMC creatures in the deck, things get a little bit iffy, and that's why I'm only playing 1 of her. I don't want to go too much higher. In the land base, the only thing of note is the 2 copies of the Cave of the Frost Dragon. Next, over in the sideboard, we have a little bit of Graveyard Hate with the Rest in Pieces, very typical card to run in most white-oriented decks. 1 more copy of Thalia to bring in against those heavy removal red Izzet decks that are spell slinging. Archon of Emeria, same thing, bring it in against Arc-like Phoenix decks. Players can't cast more than 1 spell each turn. It can also hurt us, but for the most part, we're either playing 1 creature or holding up a Collected Company. Yasharn stops sacrifice effects. These days, food decks have been all over the place. I've been running into a ton of Cauldron Familiar and Witch's Oven. With Yasharn in the sideboard, it could help against those decks. Elite Spellbinder, a very interesting card that is finally in the sideboard out of the main board. I usually see 4 copies of the Elite Spellbinder in the main, but it seems like people are starting to move toward the sideboard. This was something that I saw, I was inspired by in another deck. I want to see how it plays, if I'm going to miss the Elite Spellbinder or not. I'm not really sure. It is a super solid card and could very easily be in the main board, but the main board is definitely getting cluttered with new cards such as Hamlet Vanguard. 2 copies of Redain to come in against, a lot of different strategies, but the main one is going to be Control. It slows down non-creature spells of mana value 4 or greater. That means board wipes, and our deck is, of course, very soft to board wipes, so we always have Redain in the side in those cases. And when we need a little bit of extra removal, we have 3 copies of Skyclave Apparition. Sure, why not? So that is the deck. I hope you have a little bit of a better understanding of why some of these cards are in there or how some of the synergies work with the deck. Anyways, that's it. If you want to see some gameplay of the deck, make sure you click on that link, head on over to the other video that I made where I'm going to do it right now. I'm going to go and play 3 games with this deck.